Do you struggle to get to sleep or feel sluggish and slow in the morning? This is most likely because your circadian rhythm and melatonin is all off, not because your discipline is wrong. Melatonin isn't a sleep hormone. It architects your night. Get your rhythms right and you get your age back. And your rhythms run your life, so master them. Welcome to Longevity Masters. I'm your host, Grant Hutchby, and this show is built specifically for midlife male entrepreneurs to reverse their biological age and reclaim the asset that is most important to everyone, and that is time. We are building the world's first biological time machine, built specifically for male entrepreneurs. This show is all about adding life to your years and years to your life. And the mission is simple. This is to give 1,000 male entrepreneurs at least 10 years of powerful life back so that you can do more with your family, more with your investments, and absolutely live the life that you are here to live. And today we're talking about melatonin and how this can help your body, your business, and reverse your biological age. Let's dive in. So here we go. Melatonin is a hormone that a lot of people know about, probably know what it does, helps with your sleep, but don't really know the things that you need to do to activate it. Now, we're going to talk about a few things that activate melatonin. However, I probably have mentioned this before, and I am 100% going to mention it again because it is one thing that everyone seems to not get quite right, and that is your light management. Because of the amount of artificial light that we have and everything in our modern world, like phone screens and LED lights and all the things that we have, when the sun goes down, this will massively affect your hormone production. And managing your melatonin will also mean effectively managing your cortisol. So we've talked about cortisol previously, and cortisol is what I like to call the performance hormone or the awake hormone. And I've gone into a lot of detail into a previous episode, but it's worth mentioning here that your cortisol needs to be high at the beginning of the day and low at the end of the day. If it's not low at the end of the day, cortisol goes from being a performance hormone or an awake hormone to being a stress hormone, which is why it's linked to high stress. And people think that because they can't get to sleep, because they're stressed, it's because of elevated cortisol. And that might be true, but it might be elevated at the times that it shouldn't be elevated. So cortisol should spike at the beginning of the day with natural sunlight, with artificial light, like sad light, or a very, very bright light that is 10,000 lux or more. This is really important because if your cortisol doesn't spike at the beginning of the day, it then doesn't taper off enough by the end of the day. Because what a lot of people what's happening to a lot of people is they're not spiking their cortisol enough at the beginning of the day, so it gradually gets to its peak and then gradually tails off. And by the time you want to go to sleep, cortisol hasn't tailed off enough to be able to then release the hormone that we're talking about today, which is melatonin. Now, melatonin is called a sleep hormone. I like to call it more of an architect for your sleep. So melatonin helps you get to sleep, whereas once you're asleep, other things happen to give you an amazing rest. But melatonin needs to be there first to be able to almost construct and architect the night. So I have struggled with my sleep in the past. I have struggled with waking up feeling energized. And what I didn't realize was some of the little things that you do can have a massive impact on not only your ability to fall and get to sleep, but the quality of your sleep as well. And I will talk a lot about sleep because sleep is by far the most important thing that you can do in your day. Obviously, things like diet and exercise are extremely important in keeping your age, your biological age, as low as possible. However, if you don't get your sleep right, you won't have the energy to be able to utilize all of those nutrients and exercise at your highest capability and get the gains and the performance that you're looking for. So I've been through all this, ups and downs, testing lots of different things. And this is everything that I've learned. I've spent a long time learning my own body, but also what's really important is the science behind it. And while we all have slightly different rhythms, it's the way that we manage it is the same. So not all of us like to get up at the time that I get up at, which is fine. You know, I get up really early in the morning. However, these practices and the things that you do can be applied to whatever time you get up. So I was struggling with my sleep and I introduced one thing into my life, and this had probably one of the biggest impacts out of everything. And that is a sad light. Now, in the UK, we don't get much sunlight in the morning when we typically wake up. So let's say the typical person wakes up at 6 a.m. Okay, because you want to do a few bits before work starts, and then you get to work and start working at 8, 9 o'clock. In the UK during the winter, we won't have sunlight in the morning, and it can sometimes be cloudy until probably about 8 a.m. So what that means is that you've probably already been up for a couple of hours before you've even got the ability to go out and get sunlight. Now, this causes something called seasonal affective disorder. And not everyone suffers with seasonal affective disorder, but everyone will suffer to a degree without having morning sunlight, because what that means is that your cortisol isn't spiking enough in the morning. Now, you must get a certain amount of light, blue light specifically, in the morning within the first hour, ideally within the first half an hour of you waking up. Now, you can do this in two ways. The first way is by getting out and getting morning sunlight. But if that's not possible with the time that you wake up in the morning, then you need something called a SAD light, or a light that emits at least 10,000 lux. You can get these online from Amazon or wherever, but this is by far the best thing that you can do, is managing your light exposure at the beginning of the day. Because what this does for melatonin at the end of the day is it allows it to be released. Because what has happened is your cortisol has spiked a lot earlier at the beginning of the day, which means it starts tapering off a lot earlier, which means once it gets to a certain point, melatonin can be released. However, what's really important, and this is the problem with all of our modern things that we have in our lives, like our phones and our bright lights that we have in our ceilings, which have all the white light in them, which carries the blue light that we don't want in the evening, is when that is on within the last couple of hours of you going to bed, it has quick spikes in cortisol. So these quick spikes in cortisol stop your melatonin from being produced. So light management in the evening is also vitally important, because if you spike your cortisol at the beginning of the day, that's great, and it will start tapering off. However, if you then have spikes of cortisol in the evening with all this blue light that we have, essentially what you're doing is you're confusing your brain to say it's still daytime. So after the sun sets, which again is different times throughout different times of the year, but after the sun sets, you want your body or your brain to start thinking that it's nighttime, so that it starts producing melatonin. And what melatonin will do is it will help you get to sleep. Now, I hear some people saying, I'll just take a melatonin supplement. That's great. Melatonin supplements can be used. However, what you've got to appreciate with melatonin supplements, if you supplement with any hormone for that matter, is supplementation with that particular hormone will suppress your natural production of melatonin. So, or natural production of that particular hormone. So if you are struggling with sleep and you take melatonin and it works, You need to find out if it's because your own melatonin production isn't good, or is your light management not correct. So if you have a problem with your melatonin production, that might be where you need to take a melatonin supplement. However, if it's just your light management that isn't right and your melatonin production is fine and you're just messing it up with the light that you're seeing throughout the day, then you just need to change your light management. Now, we've just explained how to spike your cortisol so that your cortisol tapers off and allows your melatonin to produce. But what you need to do as well is reduce the amount of blue light that you get in the evening. Now, this can be done in a couple ways. One, turn off all your lights. Only have low light at the end of the day. And what this is basically turning off your ceiling lights, having lamps on, having candles on, having fires on, even having lights that have yellow or red filters on them can be beneficial. But this isn't possible in a lot of scenarios. So if you're at a friend's house, or if you're out and about, or if you simply just can't turn off the lights at home, you can get blue light blocking glasses. Now you can get 99% ones, which are basically amber glasses, and they will block 99% of blue light, or you can get red glasses, which block 100% of blue light. Why don't you go for just the red ones? Well, the red ones are a little bit more difficult to see. And so if you need to still do stuff, the amber ones are quite good because you can still see the majority of things that you want to do. There is a little bit of restriction with it, but it is worth looking into those types of glasses. So this is by far the number one thing that you can do to increase your production of melatonin and decrease your production of cortisol at the time that it matters. So go back to the cortisol episode if you're not sure about cortisol, but cortisol should be high in the morning so that you can perform at your absolute best. And that is done by introducing white and blue light to your morning routine at the right level. So it either needs to be sunlight directly in your eyes within an hour of you waking up, or a sad light with at least 10,000 lux, then you're in front of it for maybe 20 minutes to half an hour. As much time as you can possibly get, up to about half an hour, and stay quite close to the light, not too far away. So sort of within 30 centimeters or 30 inches, I think it is. The guidance is on there. So get that light right at the beginning of the day so your cortisol spikes, and that will then naturally taper off as the sun sets. Then what you need to do is within a couple hours of you going to bed is either dim all your lights, or like I said, buy those blue light glasses, either the amber or the red ones. And that will help your melatonin production massively. And remember this one thing: if you're not changing it, you're choosing it. So getting the balance of cortisol and melatonin are really, really important. However, melatonin is one of the biggest governors for your circadian rhythm, along with melatonin. The circadian rhythm is essentially your 24-hour clock. Scientifically, it's not exactly 24 hours, but this clock runs inside almost every living thing on Earth. And if we can get our circadian rhythm right, a lot of things fall into place, because one of the things that you do get right is your sleep and recovery. And sleep and recovery can be measured in lots of different ways. Obviously, you can subjectively measure it by how you feel during the day, how you wake up in the morning, how quickly you fall asleep. So you can measure those things subjectively yourself by how you feel and the times that you wake up. The other thing that you can do is get yourself a smart device. I actually wear a Whoop, and this is what all of the people that I work with wear as well. Whoop is been proven to be very scientifically sound. A lot of people use it, and it gives you a lot of data that you can use to improve your sleep quality. So you've got things like sleep consistency, you've got heart rate variability, you've got the deep sleep and REM sleep, because the quality of your sleep is not really determined by the length of time that you sleep. It's determined by the amount of restorative sleep that you have. And restorative sleep is your REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement. This is typically when you dream a lot. And your deep sleep, which is where a lot of the recovery happens. And you need to get a certain amount of restorative sleep in your sleep period. So if you sleep for 10 hours, but you don't get enough of that restorative sleep, the quality of your sleep, it doesn't really matter how many hours that you've had. But also on the flip side, you could have 5 or 6 hours and get the right amount of restorative sleep and feel great in the morning. So the reason why 7 to 9 hours is sort of recommended is to get the amount of restorative sleep that you need. That's typically how long you would need to sleep for. But these devices measure all of that stuff. You've got things like recovery score, loads of great things with your Whoop. So remember, if you can measure it, you can manage it. And the more things that we can get ahead of ourselves, the more things that we can understand about our bodies, the easier it will be to reverse your biological age. So I've mentioned this before about your body working in rhythms, and we're specifically talking about the circadian rhythm and melatonin today. But this is a point that I want everyone to absolutely grasp, is that if your body knows what's going to happen, it can deal with it better. Now, your body has to go through a certain amount of stress to be able to adapt, and that is true, which is giving it a stimulus so that it can change over the short term. But if your body is constantly changing all the time and it can't get into a specific rhythm, then it feels out of kilter. This is where jet lag comes from. So the reason why you feel groggy and all out of balance when you've been traveling to different countries in different time zones is because you're throwing your body out of its normal rhythm. This is why your body gets used to things like eating unhealthy and drinking alcohol on a regular basis, because your body learns how to adapt to those rhythms. What you want it to adapt to is good, positive rhythms rather than bad rhythms that detract away from you being the best version of yourself. So things like alcohol, the reason why we're able to deal with drinking every day when we're doing it all the time and build up a tolerance to it is because your body is in rhythm with that. So to get your circadian rhythm right, everything needs to happen at the same time, or roughly within the same time. So if you can go to bed within an hour of the same time every single day, if you can wake up within an hour of the same time every single day, the closer you can get to a specific time every single day, the better rhythm your body will be in. Same with eating patterns. If you eat at the same time, if you exercise at the same time, doing all of this stuff at roughly the same time every day will help with your circadian rhythm being in tune. And therefore, it will help your ability to get to sleep and have better sleep at night. So that's the other thing that you can do, is obviously your light exposure. So bright light at the beginning of the day, lowering your light exposure at the end of the day. If you can, get the blue light blocking glasses so that if you do need to go on your phone or you do need to go on your laptop later at night within a couple of hours you're going to bed, it doesn't impact the message that you're sending to your brain. But all the other things as well that you do throughout the day, the closer you can have them to the same time every day, the better that is going to have for your circadian rhythm, all of your bodily rhythms, but then also your production of melatonin. So they're the two things: light management and doing things at the same time every single day. And that's everything: your sleep times, your exercise times, your eating times, and other things that you might do throughout the day on a regular basis. So there are so many amazing things that happen when you're asleep, and melatonin, obviously, like I explained before, architects all of this. And the amount of stuff that happens is huge. But the three things that I think are the biggest things that happen are: we have a huge amount of cellular cleanup. And that cellular cleanup allows for old dead cells that aren't working correctly to be used or gotten rid of because we don't need them. Inflammation massively reduces. And this allows us to manage things like insulin a lot better, which helps with fat loss. So getting the sleep right is huge for your body just being the way that it should be. The last thing is it repairs all of the DNA pathways. So all of your DNA, it repairs those connections and things that happen in sequence with each other. It gets those back to where they should be. So if you don't get your sleep right, your recovery suffers, your productivity suffers, and you effectively are getting old and sluggish the more and more your sleep is deprived. And these things are a great way to measure it. The other thing that you can do to get your sleep to the way that it should be, and this is my third point, so we've got light management, doing things at the same time every day. The third thing that we can do is to make sure that we don't consume any calories within 3 to 4 hours of going to bed. Between 2 and 4, recommendation is 4 hours. However, if you can keep it between 2 and 4, so no more than 2 hours before you go to bed, do not consume any calories. Now, there are loads of other stuff that we can do on top of those 3 things. However, if you've not got those 3 things right, there is no point me talking about supplements that you can take in the evening, other things that you can do like heat therapy that you can do in the evening, because saunas are a great thing that you can do to help you get to sleep. Or if you don't have a sauna, a hot shower at the end of the evening to help you get to sleep. Ice bath, some people say helps them get to sleep, but actually it can have an opposite effect. So I'm not talking about all those extra things we can do today to promote our sleep. I'm talking about the 3 most basic things that if you haven't got right, there's no point you even considering those other things. This is why I don't talk too much about supplements and saunas and ice baths on this show, is because there are lots of things that we can get right at the bottom of the pyramid before we get the things at the top of the pyramid. So the bottom of the pyramid is the most important. And you need to get your diet, your exercise, your light exposure, and all of those things correct before we can move on to the other stuff. So as a reminder, the 3 things that you need to do to get your sleep performing at the best it can be are: number 1, get your light exposure right. A lot of light at the beginning of the day to spike your cortisol, and reduce the light 2 hours, at least 2 hours before you're due to go to bed, or get yourself some of those glasses. So your light exposure, number 1. Number 2 is to do things at the same time every day. Go to sleep at the same time, wake up at the same time, exercise at the same time, eat at the same time, do your high value work, your deep work at the same time every single day. If you can do things at the same time, or at least within an hour of each other, then you're going to get your circadian rhythm working in the best way that it possibly can. Because if your body knows when everything happens, guess what? It's going to know when it wants to go to sleep, and it will lower the hormones that need to be lowered to help melatonin be produced. So do the things at the same time every single day. And last but not least, number 3 is to make sure that you don't consume any calories within 2 to 4 hours going to sleep. So ideally 4 hours, but no less than 2 hours. So do not eat an hour before you go to bed. Do not eat an hour and a half before you go to bed. Keep it at least 2 hours. So they are the 3 things that you need to do: light exposure, do things at the same time, and don't eat any calories within 2 to 4 hours of going to bed. And if you want one more bonus thing that you can do, is just have yourself a nice wind down routine at the end, again signaling to your body it's ready to go to sleep. And if you can, make sure that your room is as dark as it possibly can be. If not, wear an eye mask. There is nothing wrong with wearing an eye mask. It keeps everything really dark. It's going to be great for the summer when you might want to go to bed when it's still light out. So get the room dark and cool. So if you want any bonus things to do, then it's just get yourself a routine and make your room cool and dark. And just remember this one thing: tomorrow is made the evening before. So your day is constructed the evening before. So get it absolutely right. So if you want easier mornings, if you want to fall asleep quicker, if you want to have more productive days, if you want to have higher energy throughout the day, this is the one for you. Get your circadian rhythm right and your release of melatonin correct, and you will have a much better sleep and therefore have a much better day the following day. And this will certainly add more years to your life and more life to your years. You can't lead anyone unless you lead your own biology. If you found this episode interesting, or you know someone that might be interested, feel free to share this with anyone who you think might need it. There is also a toolkit that you can download. Just go to bookresources.thecarnivoreentrepreneur.com and you will find this in the resources where you can download them and use them as much as you like. Totally free of charge. just need to put your email and mobile number in, I think, and you will get access to £500 worth of resources to get yourself started. And also you'll stay in the loop of all the stuff that we are doing around longevity, biology, and obviously turning back time so that you can live a much better life. That's it. That was Melatonin, and hopefully you found that useful, and really looking forward to the next episode. And remember one thing: be young, be happy, and be free, people.